Hello students, I'm going to be making a video of your gel electrophoresis lab that we are doing. You should have gotten your box from Carolina, and inside your box you have your student guide as well as your teacher's manual. So this will give you step-by-step instructions on how to use the information in all the different materials in this kit. Please make sure that you are reading all about the different solutions as far as safety goes. And then you have a bag, and inside the bag you will have tips as well as a tiny taped down piece of tubing, and that is to fit onto your syringe. And you'll be using your tips and your syringe to load your gel using all of your different samples. And so best thing that you want to do with your samples is to take your sample and hit it against the desk until all of the fluid in here goes down to the bottom. So make sure that you do that. We're just going to put that there. And so you should have 6 vials. You also have some leads right here. And so these are what your electrodes are going to be attaching to this paper. You have your electrophoresis comb, and this is what's going to be making your wells. And so you would put your comb there into your gel box. Okay, and you want to make sure that it snaps on tight. Just like that. And we have something called agarose. Agarose is a media that is used to run protein and DNA through so that it separates out the bands. Now the bands, depending on the size, will run at different levels, or different speeds, I should say. And so if you have a very large piece of DNA or protein, it's going to run a lot slower than if you have something that is very small. And so it's going to run a lot faster. So after the allotted time, it's going to show up at different spots along your gel. So you're going to melt this and you're going to pour this in and you're going to wait for it to solidify, kind of like making Jell-O. And then you need to create like a salt bath. And so for that, you have your buffer. Now this is concentrated buffer. And so you will need to read how to dilute it in your manual in order to then pour it into here and to use. Now, they do suggest that you practice using your pipette, your syringe, with some food coloring at home. So make sure that you do that. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to set everything up and then I will show you what it looks like. Okay, students, so I have gotten my materials ready, and let me move this over here. So I have my gel box, which I have made sure that the comb, let me put a piece of paper behind it. So the comb, as you can see, is pushed all the way down to as far as it can go. And I have heated up my 1% agarose. All I did was put it in the microwave for 45 seconds. And then it says there are 30 milliliters here. And if we go through the directions for the agarose, you are going to pour 10 milliliters of agarose into the gel box. So in order to get 10 milliliters, it's about a third of this bottle. Or you can do 2 teaspoons. Okay, so there is 1, 2. Okay. And then you'd want to rinse that out or dry it off. And then you're going to let it harden. And we need to make up our buffer. Now, of course, you don't have glassware at where you are, but you should have measuring containers. So we have a regular liquids measuring cup, and we have some of our cooking utensils here, and you can just use a regular large vessel. And so you want 2 cups of water, which is equal to 475 milliliters of liquid. Best to use like spring water, or you can buy distilled water in the store. We're only going to be running food coloring, so it's not as pertinent for it to be distilled water. So if you don't have that on hand, not a big deal. If you have filtered water at your house, that will work fine too. Okay, so you want to pour that in. And then for your buffer solution, it asks for you to add 25 milliliters, and that's going to be on page 4. So page 4, 25 milliliters of the 20 times buffer to 475 milliliters of water. And so 25, remember that each teaspoon, so my teaspoon is here. So this is my teaspoon. And each teaspoon is 5 milliliters, so we want 5 teaspoons poured into our buffer. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You then want to rinse that off, and you can cap this. Make sure that you are mixing that pretty well. Okay, and I'm going to pause this while this hardens, and we will move on to the next step. Okay, students, so we are still letting this harden. Taking a look at our student directions here. Hopefully everybody has taken their syringe and put in the adapter tubing on the very end. This allows a nice snug fit to your pipette applicator, which will go on to load your gel. Next, we're going to cut the electrodes to fit the gel box, 22 milliliters by 42 milliliters. So you want to make sure that you are taking this and measuring out 22 by 42. I'm going to pause while I do that. Okay, I've cut my pieces of electrodes. They're going to go on either side of the box. And you will need your magnets at this, or your batteries at this point. And so make sure that you do have 3 of these 9 volts. Now, if you take a look at your gel box, and my gel is becoming more solid, take a look there. There are spaces on either side. There's a space here and a space behind there. This is where you'll be putting your electrodes inside of that space. And on the other side as well, inside. And you will then, just like that, okay? And you can put in so the steps that you're supposed to take, you want to make sure that you are pouring the buffer solution on the gel once it is completely hardened. Again, think like Jell-O. And then you're going to take out the comb, add the solutions. You can then put these electrodes in, and then you're going to connect your battery up to your electrodes, and you're going to make sure that your positive goes to the positive and that your negative lead goes to the negative side. You're always going to run towards the positive end. So this will be positive and this will be negative. We're going to wait a little bit to make sure this is hardened even more, and then we will run the experiment. Okay, so I'm going to add the buffer in now. Remember, you only need 10 milliliters. So I'm going to use my teaspoons again. And as I'm looking at this, I do see that we do have a bit of a bell. See how it kind of curves a bit over. If you wanted to do the 10 instead of the 15, that would be fine. I like my gels a bit thicker. I feel like they run better, but this well would suffice with the 10. So if you just did 10 of the agarose, that would be fine. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to add our buffer solution. We want to make sure we've got the tablespoon. Is here. Get our agarose out the way. Going to, there's one, and there's two. So there is our 10 milliliters of buffer. Okay, you should see how it just covers our gel. Now we can take our comb out very so slightly, making sure not to disrupt any of the holes. I'm going to pause that so I can bring it closer to me. Okay, so I have my comb out, and as you can see, it has made little divots, little holes inside of your well. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your syringe and you're only going to suck up 10 microliters. Okay. Each of these samples has 30, so you only need a third of what they give you. I'm going to pause it here. I'll suck it up and I'll show you. As you can see on your syringe, it is marked. So the first little line here is 10, second little line here is 50, and the third line here is 100. And so you only want to go up to the first line. So if something happens where you have a whole bunch of bubbles in the tip that you've pushed all the way down, best thing to do is to, over the actual cap, you want to take it off and make sure the liquid goes back in. Okay, students, here I am going to load my gel. I'm going to put it through the liquid and then ever so slightly push so that it falls into that first hole. And then you can move on to the second color. Taking your tip off over your container of food coloring. And then you can just kind of set it in there and move on. So each food coloring will get its own tip. And you can move on to, I'm going to do the blue and then go from there. I'll show you what it looks like when they're all loaded. Okay, so I have loaded my gel box. I will say that it is a little difficult. If you start to see where you're sucking up the dye, you have to be so very gentle. And then when you're putting it into the gel box, teeny weeny little pushes. If you get to the very end and you can't push anymore, but you still have dye in there, just take the tip off over the container, pull up on your pipette, put the tip back on, and then you can push down into here. If you suck up a teeny bit of the buffer liquid, I would say no more than 10 microliters, which is that first little notch on your thing, on your pipette tip, and you squirt it into here to kind of get a little bit more of that dye. You can then get some more out of it. So I'm going to run this now and you guys can see what it looks like. So in order to run it, we're going to put the electrodes on one side. And remember that we want the electrodes to be positive at the bottom. I'm just going to connect my batteries. So our positive lead is going to go on the positive side. And our negative lead is going to go on the negative side of the battery, just like a car battery would. I have it set up. I have it sitting down. And then I've got my red lead here. And my black lead is going to be here. And we will let that run. You guys can see it. I'm going to pause it. So if you read the directions, this is going to take a couple of hours. They do suggest that you leave it in a warm room, but to put it in a plastic bag to reduce evaporation. Once it has traveled halfway, you're then going to disconnect the batteries and you are then going to take a picture. It should take about 60 minutes with 3 9-volt batteries. If you had 5 batteries, it would take about 35 minutes. So I will check back with you guys in an hour. See? If this is a hard lab for you, just make sure that you are persistent at it. Any questions, let me know, but have fun with it. And you do have enough to make the gel again and the buffer. So if something happens there, you can always rip it up and throw it out and try it again. Also, like I said before, make sure that you watch this video all the way through, and I'm going to write that in the beginning. I'm going to add that in the beginning. And if you don't have enough liquid, if something happens, make sure you tap, tap, tap so everything goes down. And you can suck up about 10 microliters, so a teeny weeny, like half a drop, 10 microliters of the buffer solution, and kind of mix that in with your dye, and then you can add that back in. All right, have fun with it. I can't wait to see the pictures that you guys have.